Vacations are supposed to be a much-needed escape, right? I desperately needed one. Life had become a relentless series of blows lately, between the divorce papers collecting dust unsigned on my dining room table and the corporate restructuring that left me clinging to my job by my fingernails. My mental health was hanging by a thread, so I decided Hawaii was the answer. Sun, sand, and a complete digital detox. Just me trying to reassemble the broken pieces of myself on some distant shore where nobody knew my name or my failure. Finding the right vacation rental turned into a frustrating ordeal. Most listings were either extortionate tourist traps or dilapidated shacks masquerading as authentic island experiences. Then, almost miraculously, I found a 3-bedroom beachfront house with 2 bathrooms for an absolute steal. The listing featured professional photographs showcasing gleaming hardwood floors, an airy open-concept living area, and floor-to-ceiling windows that promised panoramic ocean views that could heal any wounded soul. The reviews were sparse but enthusiastic, though I noticed none were recent. The most current comment was from 8 months ago. A couple saying they'd had an unforgettable experience. Too good to pass up, I thought. Maybe the universe was finally cutting me some slack after months of misery. The booking process was strangely efficient. No back and forth with the host, just an immediate confirmation and a detailed set of check-in instructions delivered to my inbox within seconds. I should have recognized then that something was off, but desperation has a way of dulling your instincts, doesn't it? When you're drowning, you don't inspect a life preserver for holes. I caught my flight out of LaGuardia on a Monday morning. The 7-hour journey was hellish. A toddler who screamed the entire first half. A man with a hacking cough seated directly behind me. And turbulence so severe that the flight attendants remained strapped in their seats for over an hour. By the time we touched down in paradise, I was running on fumes, powered by nothing but overpriced airport coffee and the promise of tranquility waiting at my rental. The car rental agency gave me a battered Corolla that had clearly survived several tourist seasons too many. The air conditioning wheezed pathetically, producing more noise than cool air, and something in the engine made an ominous knocking sound that intensified whenever I exceeded, but it moved. And at that point, movement was all I required. The drive to the rental property began normally enough. The expected tourist scenery of pristine beaches, swaying palm trees, and sunburned visitors taking selfies against the backdrop of an impossibly blue ocean. But as I followed the GPS deeper into the island, the landscape transformed. The well-maintained roads narrowed into single lanes, the smooth pavement giving way to gravel and dirt in places. The tropical vegetation grew increasingly dense, creating a claustrophobic green tunnel that seemed to swallow my vehicle whole. The GPS signal flickered erratically, and for several heart-stopping moments, I thought I'd lost navigation completely. But then it returned, the robotic voice calmly directing me down a winding path that appeared to have been forgotten by maintenance crews for decades. "You have arrived at your destination," the GPS announced with inappropriate cheerfulness, and I killed the sputtering engine. The house stood before me, and something in my gut twisted violently. Don't misunderstand, it looked exactly like the photographs. A charming beachfront property with weathered sage green siding, crisp white trim, and a wraparound porch that promised spectacular sunset views. But something felt profoundly wrong. The windows seemed to stare back at me like vacant eyes, monitoring my every movement. The wind rustled through the surrounding palms, creating whispers that sounded disturbingly like words just below the threshold of comprehension. I retrieved my luggage from the trunk, attempting to shake off the creeping unease. The key was supposed to be under a potted plant by the entrance. One of those fake rocks that fool absolutely no one. I located it easily, though the stone felt unnaturally warm to the touch. Warmer than it should have been even under the intense Hawaiian sun. The lock turned with a click that echoed in the strange silence. No birds singing, I suddenly realized. Aren't tropical islands supposed to be alive with bird song? The door swung open with a prolonged creak that belonged in a horror film, revealing a dimly lit interior that smelled of sea salt and something else, something older and mustier that I couldn't quite identify. I fumbled for the light switch, and yellow bulbs flickered reluctantly to life, casting elongated shadows across the hardwood floors. I deposited my suitcase in what appeared to be the master bedroom, king-sized bed, private bathroom, and those advertised ocean views through windows that desperately needed cleaning. The bed linens were crisp and immaculately white, hospital corner type, but their pristine condition felt incongruous in this otherwise lived-in space. Exhausted from the journey, I decided to conduct a quick tour before unpacking. The house was reasonably comfortable. That fireplace I'd seen in the photos, which did seem oddly out of place in tropical Hawaii. The kitchen with its granite countertops and professional-grade stainless steel appliances that looked as though they belonged on a cooking show, and a formal dining area with a table set for 8. Though I couldn't imagine 8 people fitting comfortably in this space. My throat was parched from travel, so I headed to the kitchen for water. The refrigerator hummed quietly. Too quietly. Really, as if it were consciously trying not to draw attention to itself. When I opened it, the interior light flickered twice before stabilizing. It was mostly empty save for some condiments and an unlabeled bottle of white wine. That's when I saw it, an envelope, yellowed with age, taped to the inside of the refrigerator door. The edges were stained with something dark that I told myself was merely water damage. My name, Michael, was written on it in elegant cursive handwriting, the kind rarely taught in schools anymore. I stared at it for a long moment, my hand hovering near but not quite touching it. In my profession as a risk analyst, unexpected communications usually signaled problems, but this was supposed to be a vacation, my escape from the avalanche of troubles I'd left behind. Eventually, curiosity prevailed. I carefully peeled the envelope from the door, noting how the paper felt wrong, somehow too thick, almost leathery. Inside was a folded sheet that looked newer than the envelope, though not by much. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, a sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. The handwriting matched that on the envelope, precise, almost mechanically perfect. "Hello, Michael," it began. "How long had this envelope been waiting for me?" The letter continued. "Thank you for choosing to stay at this vacation rental for the week. I hope your stay is an enjoyable one, but first, you must read the rules. Rule on 1. We do not have housekeeping service. If a tall woman in a burgundy uniform knocks on the front door claiming to be the housekeeper, do not open the door. If the woman returns the following day, hide, preferably in a room with a lock. Rule on 2. Never leave open food in the refrigerator for more than 2 days. Rule on 3. If you wake up during the night and see a man in your kitchen, remain calm. He will be gone by morning. Rule on 4. Do not go outside after sunset. Rule on 5. If you see a child in the swimming pool, call the number on the refrigerator immediately and inform them. They will send someone to handle it. Rule on 6. If you ascend the stairs and see a young girl holding a stuffed animal, enter the first door on your left. Take a toy from the box, place it in front of the girl, then go downstairs for exactly 15 minutes. It will be safe afterward. Rule on 6A. If the girl doesn't leave, run. Rule on 7. Never enter the attic, even if you hear noises. The note concluded with a neat signature. Sincerely, the owner. I read it 3 times, my heart rate accelerating with each pass. This had to be a joke, right? Some local's idea of messing with tourists? Or perhaps the owner's quirky method of making stays memorable? But if it was intended to be humorous, the punchline eluded me entirely. I could feel regret settling in my stomach like a lead weight. The rational part of my brain, the part that analyzed financial risks and calculated mortgage payments, tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a liability disclaimer, some bizarre way of warning about local wildlife or potential trespassers. But another part of my brain, a more primitive part that remembered being afraid of the dark as a child, whispered that something far more sinister was unfolding here. I pulled out my phone to call the owner, to demand an explanation or possibly cancel my stay altogether. No signal, of course. I wandered throughout the house, holding my phone aloft like a divining rod, searching for even a single bar of reception. Nothing. Just then the doorbell rang, the sound exploding through the quiet house like a gunshot. I jumped so violently that I dropped my phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor, the screen illuminating with the no service message that now seemed to mock me. Another ring, more insistent this time. I approached the front door cautiously, my footsteps silent on the old floorboards, which was strange because they had creaked noticeably under my weight earlier. The peephole was one of those antique brass ones that distorts everything into a funhouse mirror version of reality. Through it, I saw her, a tall woman in a burgundy uniform. Exactly as the rules had described, her face was obscured beneath a wide-brimmed hat that looked like something from another era. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her. Wait, then she knocked again, 3 sharp raps that seemed to reverberate through my bones. "Hello, sir," she called out, her voice pleasant and professional, like a flight attendant's. "I'm the housekeeper. I'm here to clean the house." Rule number 1 echoed in my mind. Do not open the door. There must be some mistake, I called back, struggling to keep my voice steady. I wasn't informed about any housekeeping service. She didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of my own breathing, and the distant crash of waves that suddenly seemed very far away. "Sir," she said finally, her voice different now, lower, raspier, like something trying to remember how to sound human. "I need to clean. The house needs cleaning. Let me in." The knocking resumed, but it wasn't the polite tapping from before. This was a pounding, relentless, and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The door shuddered in its frame with each impact, and I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the rug. I fell hard, the impact forcing the air from my lungs. The pounding continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I lay there on the floor, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no waves, not even the hum of the refrigerator. Just nothing. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered the courage to look through the peephole again. The porch was empty. I spent the next hour pacing the house, double-checking every lock and window. My phone still showed no signal, and the house's Wi-Fi password from the welcome packet connected to nothing. I was effectively cut off from the outside world, trapped in this house with its strange rules and whatever had just pretended to be a housekeeper. The logical course of action would have been to leave, to get into that beat-up Corolla, and drive until I found civilization again. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe curiosity, or maybe something else, something that had been waiting for me since I first saw that too good to be true listing. By late afternoon, the humidity had become unbearable. The house's air conditioning worked, but barely, pushing around warm air that seemed to adhere to my skin. A swim started to sound appealing, too appealing to resist. Despite everything that had happened, the pool I'd glimpsed from my bedroom window beckoned, promising relief from both the heat and my escalating anxiety. I changed into swim trunks, grabbed a towel from the bathroom, noticing how it smelled faintly of mothballs, and headed out back. The pool was smaller than it had appeared from above, kidney-shaped and surrounded by concrete that had seen better days. The water was clear though, invitingly blue in the late afternoon sun. I dipped a toe in, perfect temperature. Before long, I was swimming laps, trying to wash away the memory of the woman in burgundy. The water felt good, normal, and for a few blissful minutes, I could almost pretend this was just a regular vacation. That's when I saw him. He appeared without sound or warning. A boy, perhaps 9 or 10, sitting cross-legged at the edge of the pool. He wore blue swim trunks and nothing else, his pale skin almost translucent in the sunlight. But it was his eyes that made my heart skip a beat. They were vacant, unfocused, like dusty marbles set into a doll's face. He stared at me or through me, his head tilted at an angle that looked anatomically incorrect on a human neck. I froze in the water, my feet finding the bottom of the pool. Rule number 5 screamed in my head. If you see a child in the swimming pool, call the number on the refrigerator immediately. The boy's head tilted further than it should have been able to go, until his ear nearly touched his shoulder. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. I bolted from the pool, water cascading off me as I ran for the house. I didn't bother with the towel, leaving wet footprints across the hardwood as I sprinted to the kitchen. The phone number was there on a yellow post-it note, the ink slightly faded but still legible. My hands trembled as I dialed on the landline, wondering if it would even function. It did, connecting on the first ring. "Hello?" The voice was crisp, professional, as if they'd been expecting my call. Yeah. Hi," I stammered, water still dripping onto the floor. "My name's Michael. I'm at the vacation rental. There's a kid by the pool." The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken knowledge. Then the voice returned, calm but commanding. "Listen carefully. Lock all doors and windows. Do not, under any circumstances, look outside. Someone will be there shortly." Click. The line went dead. I raced through the house, verifying every lock, drawing every curtain. As I passed the windows facing the pool, I fought the urge to look outside. But human nature is a powerful thing, and at the last window, I couldn't resist. I lifted the corner of the curtain just slightly. The boy was still there, but he'd moved. He now stood at the pool's edge, his back to the house. Water dripped from his body, forming a perfect circle around his feet, despite the fact that he hadn't been in the pool. As if sensing my gaze, he began to turn. I dropped the curtain and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribcage. The doorbell rang. For a moment, panic seized me. Had the woman in burgundy returned? But when I checked the peephole, I saw two figures in black suits, their faces expressionless. They didn't wait for me to open the door. Instead, they produced a key and let themselves in, moving with practiced efficiency, not uttering a word to me. One headed straight for the backyard, while the other stood guard at the door. I caught glimpses of equipment in their hands, devices that looked military grade but somehow wrong, like technology from another time or dimension. I sat on the couch, my wet swim trunks soaking into the fabric, listening to sounds I couldn't identify emanating from the backyard. Once I heard what might have been a child's laugh, but it was abruptly silenced, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. 2 hours passed before they returned inside. The one who had gone to the pool looked different somehow. His suit was dry but wrinkled in impossible ways, and a thin trickle of what looked like blood ran from his nostril. "It's safe now," he said, his voice flat and mechanical. Without another word, they left, the door clicking shut behind them. I waited until their vehicle pulled away before looking out the window. The pool was still there, still blue, still inviting, but the water was completely still, unnaturally so, as if it had been frozen solid, despite the Hawaiian heat. After the pool incident, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me. Every creak, every shadow, every reflection in the windows seemed loaded with malicious intent. The sun was beginning to set, painting the walls in shades of orange and red that uncomfortably resembled dried blood. I needed sustenance, but the thought of cooking turned my stomach. I hadn't brought any provisions, and after the rules about the refrigerator, I wasn't sure I wanted to investigate further. Still, I had to check what supplies were available. Opening the kitchen cabinets revealed a bizarre assortment of items. Canned goods with labels so faded I couldn't decipher them. Boxes of crackers that looked new but had expiration dates from 3 years ago, and a single box of cereal that rattled in a way cereal shouldn't. I closed the cabinets, deciding hunger was preferable to whatever was stored there. The sun had almost disappeared now, and rule number 4 echoed in my mind. Do not go outside after sunset. Through the kitchen window, I could see the last rays of sunlight vanishing behind the trees. The darkness that followed seemed thicker than normal, almost viscous in its density. My phone still showed no signal, but the screen displayed 8:47 p.m. Hours to go before morning. I decided to distract myself with television, but when I turned it on, all channels showed static except one, a local station broadcasting what appeared to be vintage cartoons. But something was off about them. The characters' movements were too jerky, their voices pitched slightly wrong, and their eyes seemed to follow me around the room. I switched it off quickly. The house settled into night sounds, the typical creaks and groans of an old building, but also other noises I couldn't quite identify. Something that might have been footsteps in the attic. Rule on 7. Never enter the attic, even if you hear noises. The sound like fingernails on glass from somewhere upstairs, and occasionally, very faintly, what sounded like a child's laughter. I checked my watch, 9:23 p.m., The digital display flickered momentarily, showing what looked like strange symbols before returning to normal numerals. I decided to attempt sleep. At least unconsciousness would make the time pass more quickly. Sleep didn't come easily. The bed was comfortable enough, but every time I began to drift off, some new sound would jolt me back to consciousness. The waves crashing outside should have been soothing, but their rhythm seemed wrong somehow, as if they were hitting the shore in Morse code. When I finally did fall asleep, it was the kind of shallow, restless slumber that leaves you more exhausted than before. I dreamed of the boy from the pool, but in the nightmare, his head kept turning until it had rotated completely around multiple times like a grotesque corkscrew. I jolted awake at exactly 33 a.m. The numbers glowed an angry red on the bedside clock. Something had awakened me, some noise from downstairs. I lay there in the darkness, listening to my own heartbeat, when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Rule 3: if you wake up during the night and see a man in your kitchen, remain calm. He will be gone by morning. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in bed, to pull the covers over my head like a frightened child, and wait for dawn. But I had to know, I crept to the bedroom door, wincing at every tiny creak of the floorboards. The hallway was dark, but a faint light spilled up the stairs from the kitchen. Not electric light, but something softer, more organic, like bioluminescence. Step by careful step, I made my way down the stairs, hugging the wall to minimize the creaking. The glow intensified as I approached the kitchen, casting everything in a pale, sickly blue. And there he was. He stood at the counter, his back to me, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned suit. He was tall, too tall, his head nearly brushing the ceiling, and unnaturally thin. His movements were wrong, jerky, like a marionette controlled by an inexperienced puppeteer, as he appeared to be preparing something on the counter. Don't freak out, he'll be gone by morning. I began to back away slowly, but I must have made some small noise, because he stopped moving, just stopped, completely still, like a photograph. Then, very slowly, his head began to turn. I ran back up the stairs, taking them two at a time, no longer concerned about noise. I slammed the bedroom door and dove under the covers, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I lay there trembling, straining to hear any sound of footsteps pursuing me. Nothing came. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep again, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows. I ventured downstairs cautiously, my throat parched, desperately needing water. The kitchen was empty, everything exactly as it had been the previous day. Except on the counter was a single teacup filled with something dark that steamed gently in the morning light. Next to it was a note in that same perfect handwriting. You weren't supposed to look. I spent the morning in a daze. The teacup on the counter a constant reminder that this wasn't merely my imagination running wild. I'd poured its contents down the drain, watching the liquid leave an iridescent film that slowly crawled back up the drain pipe before disappearing. My phone still showed no signal, but the time kept changing in bizarre ways, sometimes jumping forward hours, sometimes backward, sometimes displaying impossible numbers. I'd abandoned it as a reliable way to track time. The sun traversed the sky too rapidly, or perhaps my perception of time was distorted by fear and sleep deprivation. Either way, evening approached far sooner than it should have. I needed supplies, food, water, maybe a weapon, but Rule 4 echoed in my mind. Do not go outside after sunset, and darkness was falling rapidly. I decided to perform one final inspection of the house before sunset, searching for anything I might have overlooked that could help me understand what was happening. That's when I made my fatal mistake. I went upstairs. She was there, standing at the corridor's end, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with pigtails that hung at slightly different lengths. She clutched a teddy bear that looked wrong somehow, its proportions distorted, its button eyes reflecting light that didn't exist. But it was her eyes that paralyzed me, dark, bottomless pits that seemed to absorb the surrounding light. Rule 6 activated through my panic. If you ascend the stairs and see a young girl holding a stuffed animal, enter the first door on your left, take a toy from the box, place it in front of the girl, then go downstairs for exactly 15 minutes, the first door on the left. I turned slowly, keeping the girl in my peripheral vision. The door was there, though I could have sworn this hallway had been configured differently before. My hand shook as I reached for the knob. The room beyond was tiny, barely larger than a closet, and completely bare except for a cardboard box in the center. The box looked ancient, water-damaged and soft at the corners. Inside were toys, dozens of them, all appearing decades old and slightly wrong. A doll with too many fingers. A toy car with windows that seemed to contain actual darkness inside. A wooden train that felt warm to the touch, as if fevered. I grabbed the first object my hand contacted. A small figurine made of what felt like bone rather than plastic or wood. Rule 6 hadn't specified what type of toy to use, and I wasn't about to linger long enough to be selective. The girl hadn't moved when I emerged, but her head had rotated to follow me, her neck bent at an anatomically impossible angle. I placed the bone figurine at her feet, trying to avoid looking directly at her face, then back toward the stairs. "Run, run, run," my instinct screamed, but I forced myself to walk calmly down the stairs into the living room. I collapsed onto the couch, my heart hammering in my chest, and checked my watch. 15 minutes. I just had to wait 15 minutes. The seconds crawled by. The house had gone completely silent. No creaks, no waves, not even the hum of the refrigerator. Just the sound of my own breathing and the tick-tick-tick of my watch, which seemed to be decelerating. 14 minutes. The silence grew heavier, pressing against my eardrums. 13 minutes. Was that humming coming from upstairs? 12 minutes. The light in the room appeared to be dimming, though the sun shouldn't have set yet. 10 minutes. The humming had definitely intensified, and now it had a melody, a twisted version of a lullaby I almost recognized. 8 minutes. The temperature was dropping rapidly. I could see my breath crystallizing in the air. 5 minutes. The humming ceased abruptly, replaced by the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor upstairs. 3 minutes. Footsteps, small, light footsteps descending the stairs. 2 minutes. They halted at the bottom of the staircase. I kept my eyes fixed on my watch. 1 minute. Something was breathing behind me. Time up. I looked up from my watch. She was still there. Rule 6A. If the girl doesn't leave, run. I bolted for the front door, my fingers fumbling frantically with the locks. Behind me, the girl emitted a sound, not a child's laugh, but something older, something that resonated like metal scraping against bone. The door finally opened and I burst onto the porch, only to realize with mounting horror that the sun had already set. Rule 4. Do not go outside after sunset. The darkness outside wasn't normal darkness. It moved, pulsated with a life of its own, and in that living darkness I saw them, hundreds of them, silhouettes watching from the tree line, from the beach, from the very air itself. Some tall and thin, some small like children, all wrong in ways that defied description, and they were moving toward me. I retreated inside, slamming the door shut, but it was too late. I'd violated Rule 4. As I turned, I saw the girl standing in the living room, the bone figurine clutched in her tiny hands. She smiled. A terrible, too wide smile that split her face almost in half, revealing rows of teeth that extended far back into her throat. "You broke the rules, Michael," she said, her voice a chorus of whispers. "Now you have to stay." The lights went out, plunging the house into darkness. I felt small, cold hands on my back, pushing me forward. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Do you need a vacation? A break from the stress of everyday life? We've got the perfect getaway for you. A beautiful beachfront property in Hawaii. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, at an unbelievable price. Don't worry about the previous guest. He didn't follow the rules, but I'm sure you will, won't you?